Today we have Ken G. Ken is the head of data science at Scouts Consulting Group, where he helps athletes and teams improve their performance by analyzing the data collected on them. He's probably better known for his YouTube channel, where he helps people find the way in data science careers. Ken, how's it going, man?
It's great. Thank you so much for having me, GB. I appreciate it.
Oh, appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure that the weather is beautiful in Hawaii.
Well, actually, it's pouring rain today, but the one day, the wet season's supposed to be over, but it's not like I wanted to go outside and do anything today either, so it's all good.
All right. Well, let's kick things off. Let the listeners know a little bit about your background, and how did you find this passion for data science?
So I started out as an athlete. That was my main focus. I would tell my friends I'm going to be a professional baseball player in middle school and through a large portion of high school. Then I injured my shoulder, and then I would tell my friends that I was going to be a professional golfer. And I was always chasing this big picture goal of me playing at the highest level. And I eventually, inevitably, hit a wall where I didn't feel like I was improving. I wasn't getting better. Everyone goes through this when they're pursuing elite performance. And I didn't know where to turn. I was frankly a terrible student until college. And something that flipped a switch in my head was I took my first economics course. So that economics course, in economics, you're looking at the world through trends and data and graphs. And I realized that I could do the same thing with my golf game. So I started collecting my own data when I was playing golf. I started analyzing it. And I realized that I was starting to improve by looking at a couple of the economics concepts applied to my golf game. So the first was marginal returns. So I could focus on one area of my golf game more. And if I focused on that area, I might not get as much improvement as if I just spent a little bit of time focusing on this other area of my game. So it was one of these things where the amount of time that it takes to improve depends on the area of your game you're focusing on. Maybe I could just make this huge improvement focusing on my iron play just a little bit, whereas I could hit putts for hours and hours and I wouldn't really improve that much. Maybe just a very, very tiny amount. And you could compare the strokes associated with that apples to apples. So that got me really excited about data in general. Inevitably, my golf career ended. I tried to play a little bit after college, and I had fun, but I didn't make any money. So I ended up looking and really getting fascinated with the field of daily fantasy sports. So I was playing the games constantly. I was looking through the data. And that was a different type of analysis. I wasn't trying to improve my own performance. I was trying to predict the performance of other athletes, again, at a much higher level than myself. So I started to get fascinated with this. I started to try to build models, and I hit a wall. I realized that I didn't have the technical capabilities to build the models that I wanted to build. So I eventually went in and I started picking up these skills. And I found that I definitely didn't know where to go for those. And one of the best places was to go back to school. So I found the Master's in Commerce program at the University of Virginia. I went through that. I picked up quite a few more skills. And then I went to work in consulting. I kind of left that dream of the analytics behind because I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. Funny as it seems, I started working at my current company, Scouts Consulting, while I was doing the other consulting. And it was a field or a business that was started out of love for the sport with a couple of my friends. And that was the work that I really wanted to be doing. I was analyzing sports again. And at that point, I still realized, wow, I don't have enough technical skills to figure this out. So I went back to school again, and I got my master's in computer science this time. And finally, through that process, through a lot of self-teaching as well as through curriculum, I was able to accrue the relevant modeling skills, the relevant coding and building skills that I needed to start to answer or to get more involved in answering the questions that I've always had about, one, improving performance, and secondly, predicting performance in the athletic domain. That is how my main work story started. My side hustle, or my YouTube channel, which I think is more the focus here today, that started as an offshoot of my schoolwork. I was doing a project, I posted it online, and I forgot about it. And I came back 3-4 months later, and it had, I think at the time it was like 1,000 views. And for me at the time, that was incomprehensible. I couldn't believe that many people would be interested in something that I put together for my schoolwork. And that kind of lit a fire under me is, hey, if I have a platform, what type of content that could I put out there that I think would be interesting or valuable? Because when I made that video, I remembered distinctly the feeling of how much I enjoyed putting it together. So I said, hey, if I want to put more of this, what are some things that maybe I wish I had had 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, as I was trying to learn these skills and break into this path and apply these skills to something that I love? What could I make to give Ken from that time period a little bit of an advantage or some more clarity? Because it doesn't seem like it now, but I remember just how frustrating it was not knowing where to look, not knowing what to start with, and not knowing what to learn in that data science journey.
Right. I think what's incredible about kind of your journey is how you, one, followed your passion, but then also it was tied to this kind of not just self-awareness of what you didn't know, but this never-ending desire to learn. It's actually interesting. You know, of many of the entrepreneurs that I know or I've talked to, you went back to school a couple times to kind of hone some of those skills. Maybe we dive a little bit into when you find an area that you feel like you don't have enough technical skills, as you said, is your instinct to, hey, I need to learn this on my own? Or is it, let me find a buddy that can augment those skills? How do you draw the line whether, you know, this isn't one of my core capabilities, or this is something that I actually think that I can pick up and I find joy in picking it up?
That's a really good question. And historically, old Ken, you know, 3-4 years ago, when I didn't know where to look, I would just go back to school because, hey, they have a formal place to find all this stuff. It's organized. I learned very well in a classroom setting. Over time, I've realized how many more resources there are out there for anything that I would want to learn ever. On the internet, you can learn anything. It's probably going to be as good as what you learn in a class, and it's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper. So I think that I've transitioned into that process of like, hey, I can learn almost anything, and it's fun for me to learn almost anything. There is that trade-off, though, is learning this going to be worth my time? So I face that trade-off with, for example, YouTube videos, is learning the video editing, the camera stuff, the promotional elements, and how the algorithm stuff work. Is that worth my time compared to the actual content creation itself of me planning the videos and producing the content? And that's something I still haven't figured out. I personally am not great at giving up responsibility of the pipeline yet. And that's something I'm really working on trying to understand better for myself, is where is that tipping point where it probably isn't worth it to do that? You know, I've found that I love the video recording. I enjoy the editing because it's part of an expressive thing. I know that I want this little joke in here in this part, and it plays back on the other part of the video. But inevitably, there is going to be a time where, as you continue to grow, you can't do everything. And I'm starting to get more comfortable, hopefully, with, you know, having other people schedule the videos, having other people do some reach out and communication with other people, because those are the things that I kind of feel is a grind on myself. I will say, you know, you made that comment. It's like, you know, I've come back to school twice. Not something I generally recommend. I'm in quite a bit of student loan debt still. And I have always looked at school and going back as kind of a hedge, right? I know that the skills that I'd be learning in both of the master's programs that I did were going to be valuable in the market. I'd be very employable. And any of the risks I took in my career could be offset a little bit by those, because I'd be, you know, frankly, I think I could get a job relatively quickly if I wanted one that would pay fairly well, that, you know, if I needed one right away. I also thought that school was buying me time to be able to pursue some of the things I was more interested in. When you go back to school, you're studying. If you're not doing it full time, I guess I was doing it full time, so I didn't have as much time as I could have, but you have opportunities to work on projects. You have opportunities to work with different people that you probably wouldn't be associated with beforehand. And that is a breeding ground for ideas and creation and entrepreneurship. So I realized that in undergrad, I didn't leverage those resources at all. I didn't leverage the communities that were created by default in these schools. And going back in grad school, I said, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to leverage these to the max to try to make the most of this opportunity.
Yeah. That's no, that's great, man. So one question I ask everyone is, what was your first action? And I think you kind of highlighted a little bit of how you kind of stumbled upon this possibility of a YouTube channel. So when you came back and recognized that you had 1,000 views, and you're like, I think that I might, really invest in this channel. What was the first thing you did? What was the first week like, and first week of actions?
Just made another video. That's the thing, is that especially in the content space, the way that you learn is through doing. Even in the data science space, getting your hands dirty. I realized pretty early, I watched a good amount of, I guess maybe that was even a first step, is like how to become a YouTuber, how to make videos or get traction online. And what they always tell you is just produce a video every week, be consistent with it. And it isn't that the consistency is good for the algorithm, which it can be, but the consistency helps you create that habit of creation, and it gets you reps. So there's a famous study that I remember. I don't remember who published it or anything like that, but it was a photography class. And the teacher split the class into two groups. And he basically said that half of the class, you only take one picture and you submit one picture, and it's the best picture that you can possibly make with all the time in the class. And the other group, they take as many pictures. It's based on volume of pictures that they took. And the group that was their grade was based on volume, ended up taking significantly better pictures than the ones that were submitted by the one picture group. And to me, it's the same thing with YouTube, with almost any business that you want to create, is you learn so much by iterating and taking and analyzing. And I see my previous video, I know that I wanted to make this little change. And it's those little small tweaks over and over that go from a really rough product to a polished product. Someone also said that you basically are a bad content creator until you've produced your 100th piece of content. And I really took that to heart. Right after my 100th video was posted, I hit the 10,000 subscriber mark. And then 2 weeks later, I hit the 50,000 subscriber mark, and it really took off. And I mean, that's probably a lot of just serendipity and kind of good timing on the paradigms point there. But it really is something that I firmly believe in, is you just have to produce, and you get better by producing.
I think you're hitting on a spot that is really hard for people to kind of accept. I think naturally people want everything they do to be remarkable, right? I think in the context of, if you've got a business, you're creating social media content or something, every post has to have this many followers, or likes. This post has to look this way. I mean, I think people spend a lot of time researching how to do it perfectly right. And what I'm hearing is just do it, just try it. And the more reps you get, you will naturally become better at it, and kind of get the riches of and the payout of all the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's another layer, which is the nuance of your own individual endeavor, is that what works for other people, at a broad level, it might sort of work for you, but there's idiosyncrasies within your own work that makes perhaps their strategy a little bit less effective for you. So something in my own life is, I was reading all these things with what makes a really good YouTube thumbnail, right? And the audience they're talking to are essentially vloggers, people who are doing reviews, not educational style content. So I would have kept producing thumbnails like those people are telling me to, if I wasn't analyzing my own thumbnails and doing my own research and seeing what worked and what didn't work independently. So I still haven't necessarily cracked that game, but I know that the same types of things, which are sensationalistic, like big face, big eyes, whatever that is, it's not quite as effective for my type of content. And, that's the thing is, as a business or as a content creator or anything like that, you should be open to small acceptable failures, right? If I misspeak in a video, or especially in one of my earlier videos, it's really not a big deal, right? If I produce so much volume, everyone's going to forget about that. If I'm continually building stuff and my stuff is consistently good, people are going to pay attention to the baseline, not that one little mistake that I made 12 videos ago that is completely overshadowed by my new stuff.
Right. No, that's no, I love that. You have to have some margin of failure that you accept. It's the cost of doing business. No, that's fantastic.
And the margin gets smaller with the larger body of work, right?
Yeah.
The margin gets bigger. That's acceptable with the larger body of work, because you have so much. It's like, oh, that's a one-time instance out of this huge, vast sea of good stuff. People usually, think of that as a drop of the pond. If you're only producing one video every year, you better make sure it's really good, right?
Right. Now, let's dive into that, just because I know you've been focused on data science. You're head of data science in your business. You've gone to school to kind of learn. How do you deal with imposter syndrome, right? How do you deal with the idea that there are a lot of people in this world that know data science way better than me? Why would someone listen to me? How did you kind of deal with that kind of line of thinking, if you had that line of thinking?
No, absolutely. I think that that's a very real phenomenon with a lot of people in data science and business and any of those places. And there are two things that I took away from that, especially in the content space. It's a really, really large phenomenon. So the first thing is that I don't think imposter syndrome, the feeling, ever goes away. I think that you're always going to feel like you could have done more, like there are people better, because inevitably there's always going to be people that are better than you at one broad area. There's going to be better data scientists than me, for sure. There's probably going to be better sports people who combine sports and data than I do. There probably aren't many people that combine sports, data, and content creation as well as I do, though. And so the more narrow you niche down, the less imposter syndrome you should feel, because there's fewer people to compete with, right? But there's still always going to be that feeling, and you have to figure out how to use it to your benefit rather than it being overwhelming for you. So I've always used imposter syndrome to push me to do more projects, to push me to learn more, to push me to understand the space better, because that's something that I can't control that I have this feeling, but I can control what I do with the feeling. I might as well leverage it into something positive and into my learning rather than being overwhelmed by it. Actually, there's three things you can do. So the second thing is that you just produce a large body of work. I have a lot of videos. I have a lot of tutorial style videos where I'm actually coding. I do a reasonable amount of projects where I'm not just proving that I'm somewhat capable to the world, I'm proving it to myself. And I can go back and look through my portfolio. I can look through the things that I've done and say, hey, I've done these things. I've built them out. There's something I can show and something that I'm proud of. And no one can take that away from me. Sometimes you have to do work just to prove to yourself that you can do it too, right? I mean, that's a feeling. That's a feeling I had when I was going into my master's computer science. This is a completely new field to me. I'd never done serious coding. I didn't have a bachelor's in computer science. I went through that whole program and I said, if I can do this, if I can learn this discipline that I'm really not very familiar with, I should be able to do anything. And you have to remember those things, and you have to look back not just in what you did in the last week, but look back in what you did over the last month or the last couple of years, because that's going to be a realistic snapshot of how far you've come, not in the short time period. The last thing is, I think it's always okay to share the journey. I don't claim ever that I'm an expert. That is not who I am. My videos, I'm talking about the experiences that I've had and some of the things that I've observed. There are people that can say, Ken, you're wrong. This is from my experience. This is different. And I have no rebuttal to that. That's probably true. It's a different experience that I've had. I'm just speaking from what I've done. I also think it's great if you're new to the field or whatever it is, share your experience, share what you're working on, share your code. If you think about what's successful on YouTube, you're not watching people who are experts in their field all the time. You're watching vloggers who are frankly idiots running around doing interesting stuff that you think, right? Like you're there for the journey. You're there to see them mess up. You're there to see them grow and learn. And I think that's a very, very powerful lens to look at content through, is that, hey, I'm not the expert. I'm just sharing my journey with you, and maybe you'll learn from it. Maybe you'll laugh at it. Maybe you'll just get some entertainment out of it. But that's what it's there for. It's there not to be judgmental or telling you what to do. It's there to be my expression of myself and what I've learned and what I'm doing now.
Right. But at the same time, how do you deal with that person doesn't know what the heck they're talking about? How do you is there a moment where you feel protective of the field, protective of the subject, and I don't want to say offended, but discouraged by, people that are putting out content that isn't valuable to the discipline or to the space? Or is that just kind of an overblown kind of, that's a small percentile of the population, and why kind of focus on it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in this space currently, it's a very nominal portion of people that are producing information that I would deem to be invaluable or detrimental to the field. I am so fortunate. Like, the data science community is, in my mind, unbelievably good. And it's also a self-filtering type of thing. Like, the community is very vocal. And if people think someone's doing something wrong, frankly, let that person know. And if they're, they're making these types of mistakes. So, I do feel like I have to be careful about what I put out. I have to make sure that I'm doing my homework and my due diligence. But I also have a community of friends that I send a lot of my work to, and make sure that most of the things that I'm doing are vetted. And I think that that's a safe way to hopefully protect yourself from that, is to get people that are smarter than you and a fair number of them to evaluate your stuff, rather than just say, hey, I'm going to chuck this out there and tell people what to do and hope it hits. But
right. So this is an interesting thing, because you're the first YouTuber, YouTube star, YouTube channel owner that's been on the podcast. And I think about kind of traditional business, right? You think about revenue streams and kind of how to optimize expenses, so on and so forth. But even in this conversation, we've talked a lot about community, right? And in many ways, building that community kind of is your revenue, right? Whether not monetary, but that's the value that you're providing. You're creating this community of people to connect amongst themselves, connect with you. Tell me about kind of starting new and starting building your community, kind of in this journey that you've been on.
Yeah, that's something that I take a lot of pride in. I mean, the community is something that I care a tremendous amount about everyone who's interacting with me. They're willing to spend their time to watch me for 10, 15 minutes. I wouldn't watch myself for 10, 15 minutes. It's awful nice of them, right? And, my thought is, I'm trying to just create value for those people while intermixing my own personal enjoyment of the content creation process. And so if I'm doing those two things, and if any creator is doing those types of things, those two things, I think they're going to have success in that platform. A lot of community building is about reach. And early on, I would share on Twitter, I would share on Facebook groups what I was working on. I would cast a pretty wide net, and you find that those are great ways to reach people. And inevitably, if people are seeing you in a couple different areas, and if they're hearing you talk more and more, it's great. I will say that YouTube itself is great for building community because the algorithm, it's a search algorithm. It puts you in front of people, or it's designed to put you in front of people that are like-minded or that want to watch your videos or would be interested. So in a sense, I've been able to outsource a little bit of that community building to the YouTube algorithm in and of itself. And I think that that's really cool because it's kind of a matching thing, is that, hey, I'm producing this content that I think have been valuable to Ken 2 years ago. Now the YouTube algorithm goes and finds those people that this would be as valuable as possible to. So that's one thing I've liked about the content creation portion, is I don't have to go out and build that community on my own. I don't have to go door to door. I don't have to do those things. If I really focus on producing what would be the most valuable to that hypothetical person that I'm thinking of talking to and mentoring, then the system kind of builds itself around that, and those people come my way and are sent my direction. And the community building, that's something we've talked before. I've had a couple companies, startups that I wanted to build, that I built apps for, whatever it was, or our team built apps. And our biggest problem was adoption. We weren't able to get people who were interested in the product or are interested in what we were working on quickly enough. We couldn't get people to try our things out. And as I started building more YouTube content, I realized that, hey, if I want to produce a business or a product in the future, I'm building the community now to have those people to A/B test it, or to be beta testers, or to experiment with it, or to give me feedback. And, I would never produce anything or build anything that would be a detriment to my community. It's all in line with creating value for the people there. But I have this group of people now that know me. I can tell them my story. I can tell them what I'm working on. And I would expect most of them would be really excited about being involved in any of the projects I'm working on. So for any of the future businesses that I have, the community can act as a launch pad. They can be involved in it. They could maybe even contribute to those things. And I think that that's flipping traditional business a little bit on its head, is that, hey, find the community first, build the product second, and they can help you identify the problems that they're having.
I want to double down on this concept. I want to double down on this statement you just made. The tools like YouTube is like an outsourcing function of building the community. That's a very interesting, and maybe I'm just daft, but I never thought of it that way, right? I've never thought of it as, these platforms that exist, they are in many ways an outsourcing function for your business. Whatever it is, it's some type of outsourcing function. It's a very powerful way of thinking about those tools.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes even further than just the audience building, right? So YouTube, if you get to a certain size, you can sign up to make ad revenue, basically. And they play some commercials on your videos, and you get a chunk of the money that's paid for the commercial in your videos, right? And so it's a one-stop shop. I'm growing my audience. I'm also getting revenue from YouTube that I don't really have to do anything about. And I can focus on making the videos that are useful. I can focus on just really understanding my audience. I can focus on the things that matter more, that, rather than me having, not that I'd be really looking for advertisers or anything like that, but a lot of YouTubers in the space, if they didn't have that option, they'd be going out and they'd have to spend a lot of their time looking for people who want to advertise on their videos, do all of that stuff independently. And it's nice that there are options for you to be able to really just focus on what's important to you, producing content that's valuable, and all the other things, or a lot of the other things, are kind of taken care of, and they facilitate you, allow you to grow more if you're producing good content.
So talk to me a little bit about kind of the entrepreneurial spirit, or as another guest said, the illness of entrepreneurship.
Good way to describe it.
How'd you catch that bug? Coming out of school and Like how did you decide, you know what, I don't want to get a full-time job. I want to build my own thing.
So admittedly, in a very strange way, this was drilled into me from a very young age. So both my parents are medical doctors. They both own their own practice. And my dad would always tell me, you want to become a dentist, you want to become a doctor because you can have this freedom that I have. You can make a good income. You can also choose your own hours. You have a lot of control over your lifestyle. And I guess I didn't take the medical advice into account, but I did. Those lessons about entrepreneurship were really appealing to me. Is that, hey, I want that freedom. I want to be able to take a Wednesday off and go play golf. I want to be able to work when I want or when it's convenient for me, and that bled in to me being a fairly, I guess, awful student and slightly rebellious when I was in college and stuff. But I did realize that there's an outlet for those types of things, and I'd also it also became a lot more clear to me when I started working for other people is that, I think my boss is an idiot or those types of things. You realize, like, Ken, if you really think you can do it better, why not go try and do it yourself? Right. And that leap is scary, but it's also a fun challenge for me is that, hey, if I think I could improve upon it, if I think that my way is best, put your money where your mouth is. And I've always wanted to give myself that opportunity to say what is possible if there isn't anything holding you back. Admittedly, I tried that with golf, and that was one of the first really difficult things in my life where I was like, I tried presumably my hardest and I wasn't able to do it. And that was something I was like, wow, it's humbling, right? You reach a wall, you reach your limitations, but I realized that I wanted to go around that wall and try something else and really put my all into it and see what I was capable of there. And it turns out that on the content side and the analysis side, there's a lot less of a wall, or the walls are a lot easier to get around. And that's very exciting for me.
Yeah. What misconceptions did you have about entrepreneurship when you first kind of started doing it?
So I always thought entrepreneurship had to be a startup. You had to get funding. You had to get VC money. You had to go the traditional path. And what I realized, I forgot what book it was. I think it's like one of Tim Ferriss's book, the 4-Hour Work Week. And I realized that a business is just something that makes money, right? It doesn't have to be fancy. Yeah. A restaurant is an entrepreneurial venture. If you open up a physical therapy gym, that's an entrepreneurial venture. And those are really great ways to make money. They're even more tried and true than some crazy quote unquote $1 billion startup that makes, I don't know, like portable rollerblades or something, right? But that's when I realized that, and I also tried to build a couple of those, and to me, they didn't make any money to start, right? And so I created a bunch of content because I loved it, and then eventually, I didn't even have to do anything. I could flip a switch and I could start making money from it. So YouTube, the content business for me, it cash flowed around the time when I wanted to start taking it more serious. And so that's really important, is that you can actually see the fruits of your labor in almost real time. That was a revolutionary business concept for me, is that if I can produce things where they return relatively quickly, I can see how my hard work turns into either growth of an audience, personal growth, knowledge, or income. Why wouldn't I want to do more of that? So I've really focused all of my entrepreneurial energy into things that I can see a gradual and steady return on. So I make more videos, I do affiliates, I've produced a course. Those are things that they're small and continuous payoffs over time. And I always thought you just had to work really hard and get this big nut, and it just doesn't work like that. The idea of like passive income in some sense is also just a very novel concept to me, and an incredible way to accumulate wealth over time.
You talked about kind of in your life you've run up against that wall. When you think about your kind of sports career, in your life now with content creation, what wall are you seeing yourself approach? What are the challenges you're trying to work through right now? And kind of what tactics are you using to climb over that wall or go around them?
It's a really good question. So the first wall that I really face is not having enough hands or not having enough capacity to do everything that I'd like to do. And I read a book, it's called The One Thing, about 2 years ago. This was one of the biggest things that contributed to all of the so-called YouTube success that I might have had. And the idea is you focus on the thing that's most important. There's like the Pareto 80-20 principle. And if you're pulling the lever that moves the boat the furthest, you're going to travel the furthest. Like if you're worrying too much about all the things that don't really matter. And the idea was that I just focused on producing YouTube content. That's all I did for a full year, and it really paid dividends for me. I think that as I want to do more, as I want to scale, I have a podcast now, I have a newsletter, I have some of these other things, which I think are very important in moving, not just going from just having a YouTube channel to having an actual business that can create even more value for people. Dividing my attention is very difficult. You have 3 kids instead of 1 kid, and you want to make sure that you nurture all of them. That can be a little bit difficult at times. And to me, the best way to do that is to get help. And the biggest wall I'm facing now is, how do I find the right people? How do I design a system where people can fit into it and it works well, rather than hiring people and them not knowing what to do and making things more confusing for myself? Because I could definitely see it going that way as well. So that's probably the biggest one, is how do I create a system that is built to scale rather than just built to maintain like it's doing now. There's also, like saturation. I don't think the YouTube market for me is saturated by any means, but inevitably there's only a certain addressable data science market on a platform for me. And so it's, do I continue to try to expand on YouTube, which is totally fine, but do I like rebrand a little bit? Do I start making slightly different style content? Do I just take YouTube content and move it across different platforms? Let's say TikTok. Let's say, obviously I'm doing the podcast now on LinkedIn, on Instagram. I mean, is it even worth pursuing different types of content? Is this a content business, or is this an education business? Whatever it is it a business at all, or is it still just one of my own passion projects? So that to me is, those are 2 real areas where I'm having to do introspection. I don't think I'll ever stop doing my main job, and so managing that capacity and understanding myself while I'm doing a lot of these things is a really aggressive learning experience.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. How do you distinguish the line between kind of business and passion project in your head?
So I've historically been awful at that. I look at everything I do as a product of things that I want to do. And I was at a conversation with some of my friends the other night, and they're like, "Oh, it seems like you work a lot." And I don't look at it that way. It seems like I'm just doing stuff a lot. But is it work? Is it enjoyment? Is it
right?
It's all, my whole life is a gray area in that regard. And to be fair, I do have, like, if I'm going on dates or something, I can turn my phone off, right? Like, there are parts of my life that gray area doesn't touch. Or if I'm playing golf, or if I'm spending time with friends and I'm dedicating that time, that's how I differentiate. There's no work and like pure pleasure or like pure leisure. Those things to me are work and hobbies, should I say. Those things are very often intimately connected together. And that's in some ways a good thing, and in other ways like a really terrible thing if we're talking about how balance is traditionally defined.
Right. I remember seeing an interview. I think it was Jeff Bezos, and I really liked how he summed it up. I've hated the concept of work life balance. I really like that kind of work life integration. And his quote was, "It's really about energy, right? What gives you energy? If your job gives you energy, you're not going to look at it like work. If your family spending time with your family or going to play golf gives you energy, then you don't have to think of it as this balancing act. You just have to really distinguish what are the things that give me more energy and revitalize me and fill up my tank." And I thought that that was a really kind of healthy way of looking at the activities you do on a day-to-day basis and saying, yeah, no, this job feels like a job because it's draining my energy, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's a very, that sums up what I was trying to say very well, is that as long as these things all are like contributing positively to my energy levels and my livelihood and my happiness, there's no reason to even label them, right?
Right, right. And a couple conversations I've had with folks, they talk about, entrepreneurship is this constant change, and you've touched on it. It's constantly trying new things, seeing if it works. Try, learn, try, learn, try, learn, and sometimes you hit gold, but even when you do, you need to keep trying new things, right? And change is hard, change is stressful. How do you kind of manage that constant anxiety or constant stress that comes with trying something new, putting yourself out there on YouTube? Your face is all over the internet. How do you deal with that?
So you get habituated to it, right? I think I'm very fortunate that I produce something new almost every week. And so I'm almost numb to the fact now that I'm iterating and trying different things. I've done it. I think I have 180 some odd videos on YouTube now. I've done it 187 times
Wow.
in a couple years. And so the idea that I have to come up with a video, a new topic, try something new every week has just been ingrained in me. And I also think that that's the value of the reps that we were talking about before. That's the value of putting yourself out there, putting out content, creating volume, is that all of the effects of entrepreneurship, all of the stresses and negative things, just like how the minor mistakes are overshadowed by the body of work, the feelings you have of anxiety and those types of things get overshadowed by your body of work as well. If I produce a video that isn't well received, well, it's one of almost 200, right?
Right.
Who's going to say, oh, Ken made this bad video and that's it for me. It's done.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully, I probably wouldn't want that person as a subscriber anyway. If they're going to be swayed that easily by the things I'm producing. So I think that you just get acclimated to it if you do it enough. And that's the same with comments. I get bad comments all the time, but I've seen enough of them that they don't really affect me anymore, right?
No, that just seems that just always seems like the hard part. I think that there's an interesting balance of self-awareness, self-confidence, and humility. I don't know. Maybe it's other traits, but it always just seems fascinating how at peace, you could be, knowing that all of these people are just going to comment on your life or what you think and how stupid you are, how smart you are. That's just a interesting kind of mental thing that I always think about whenever putting content out in the world. It's how much do you protect yourself versus how much do you put yourself out there?
Yeah, I think I'm producing content online has made me a lot more confident in myself because I see myself speak all the time. I'm constantly improving how I, my content and the things that I produce. I can look back at the first video I made or the second video I made and see how far I've come. And if that doesn't give you confidence, I don't know what does. Is to see personal growth at a week by week level. That's pretty amazing. And I wish I could share that experience with almost everyone. And I will say, this is a pursuit of passion. Like no one should get into YouTube for the money, right? It takes, my hourly rate, if I was really thinking about it for all the time I put in, is probably like $2 or $3, right? For hour to money I've earned on YouTube. That is not why anyone should do this. That is not why I got into this. But I still have always looked at this in some sense like a personal pursuit and also like a business. And in a business, in a sense that like I am careful about my image online. I'm careful about what I say. I try not to make rash decisions, and I try to like take everything with a grain of salt. If someone says something like really mean, I'll read it and I'll say like, is there any truth to this? Right? Is there like objective like criticism that I can improve upon? Like someone will say like, hey, it sounds like you're talking underwater, or, like your hair looks stupid and a couple other things. And it's like, well, realistically, is the audio quality of my video any good? Right? Is there something wrong with that? Like, is that something I could improve upon? If I realize that, there's little truth to it, I can note that down and I can just filter that message and say, hey, like, this is what I took out of it. The rest is them just being angry at the audio quality. Like right. I've gotten enough good comments and enough positive feedback to say like, anything they say about my appearance, like I do okay dating, right? Like anything that they say about my intelligence, like I've gone through those 2 master's degrees. Anything that they say about how I speak and my likability, whatever it is, like I've been invited to do enough speaking. There are enough people to watch my videos that the vast majority of people aren't treating that as an issue. And so I use the data that I've collected in my real life, like those things that I just mentioned. Those are all data points to point to if someone is being real or they're just being mean. And maybe not a lot of people like view it like that or can conceive negative feedback like that, but definitely something that has helped, because you kind of got to develop a little tougher skin, and the best way for me to do that is to just quantify everything.
In hindsight, what are the things that you wish you knew when you started?
That's an interesting one. I think that, so I'm not someone that has any regrets. Like I went down the path that I did and I've become who I am because of all my mistakes and all the things that inevitably also went well, right? I will say that I wish I had appreciated the importance of building things and putting things out there and sharing them with the world. That's something that I take my greatest pride in now. And historically, when I was a kid in high school and college, I didn't have any appreciation for that. I would just kind of put whatever was out there. I'd turn in half-written homework. I do those types of things. And I forget where I read this. I do this a lot. I remember the content, but I don't remember who to attribute it to.
In the same way.
Someone I read somewhere that you do everything how you do anything. And that really resonated with me. It's that, hey, if I'm going to learn something, or if I'm going to like brush my teeth, I'm going to do it well. And that doing that well is going to bleed into how I floss my teeth, and bleed into maybe how I sleep at night, and maybe bleed into my work and some of these other things. And I really wish I had attributed that to any of the work that I did, the homework, the small things that I did in the past, because I think that would have really paid tremendous dividends for me in the future. I've never been like super detail oriented, and I'm still not, but there are elements of detail orientation that can be really valuable in what I do now. And understanding how to integrate the details into the big picture is something that I'm finding increasingly valuable every day I produce content, every day that I work related to any form of business or lifestyle choice that I'm making.
If you are a listener to this podcast, right, this podcast is very much focused on, let's have the honest conversation of what it's like to be an entrepreneur, build a business. It's less about the inspiration, more about what it's actually like, so you get that context and insights into what you might be signing up for. If you were to be a listener of this podcast, what would you want to hear? What would be most helpful to you?
I think that the most helpful thing to me would be to understand how to identify or how to like get started on the path of entrepreneurship. And my path, fortunately for me, it was very clear all the time, is that I'm chasing these problems that I want to solve that are relevant to my life and that I'm fascinated with. And I think the idea is that solve the problems that are relevant to you, create solutions that are valuable and implementable in your own world, and then scale them out. I see so many people first like trying to solve like giant problems, right? Like Elon Musk is trying to put us on Mars. And that might have been his initial goal, even when he was a kid. But there were so many intermediary steps and intermediary things that were required to get to that level. First, he had to make money. Okay, how do you make money? You create a product around money and transactions, right? His first company was a financial, or one of his first companies. His first one was, I think, Zip2. But I think his second company was XPay, which was like, hey, we're going to try and make a lot of money by dealing with money, and then we can fulfill these other types of goals. So understand the problem, understand the smaller businesses that it takes to get to that larger problem, and start building things. Start getting your hands dirty. Start trying to create a business that cash flows right away. Or like, what is the smallest grain of that larger business you want to create that you can make money out of, or that you can build a product around, or that you can scale? I really wish I'd focused more on, again, the cash flow and what was making me money quickly, because money is the ultimate scaler, right? If you're making $2 a day and you turn it to $10 a day and $15 a day, you can reinvest that back in the business, and that's an unbelievably powerful thing.
Yeah. Well, so I 100% agree with you. At the same time, as you mentioned, walking into YouTube doing it for the money is a terrible idea, just because your kind of rate per hour is awful. So how do you balance that? How do you balance pursuing something because it's a passion, kind of seeing your big picture vision, and then backing into those steps where some of those intermediary steps may solely be focused on kind of money? How do you find that balance?
Well, I think the other completely flip side of that coin is take something that you're already doing for fun and figure out how to monetize it, right? Like, I didn't get into YouTube again because I thought it would make me wealthy, which again it hasn't. But I realized at a certain point, this is something that I can turn into some form of income, and I would do it anyway, even if I wasn't making money. I might not do it as frequently, but it's something that I have this immense passion for. And so the other side of that is, look at what your hobbies are. Let's say you do woodworking, or you're building stuff in your garage, whatever that might be. Do you want to sell the things that you're building? Do you want to create content around it? Do you want to start a blog? Do you want to do those types of things that can enhance your enjoyment of it? And then if you get traction, that's something that you could potentially monetize. But in my mind, there's those two different tracks of like content or like producing something because you love, and then flipping that switch on to monetize, and like building a following or building the expertise. Or it's a business, and like, this is something you want to monetize as quickly as you can. And I look at for example, the podcast that I do, right? That's something I enjoy. It creates an incredible network. But I had advertisers in the first couple episodes. I knew that was something that I could earn income from, that I could also feed back into that business or that line of business. And, I hired an intern that helps me with editing there, and that's a lot more of an oiled machine that is designed, one, to create value, two, because I enjoy it, and then three, because it is like a financial vehicle, or I'm planning for that to be a financial vehicle down the road.
Yeah. Oh, makes sense. What question do you think I should ask the next guest?
You'd given me, I knew this one was coming, and I can't remember what I said, so I'm gonna free will it. I think the question that I would ask is, like, what have you built in your spare time? I think, to me, that's a very fascinating thing. I don't think. I think you might be surprised at what you find. Like, for example, I made a pizza in my free time a couple nights ago, and I loved it. I had so much fun. I made the dough myself. I actually made 5 pizzas, 5 different ones, and you like what you do in your free time tells you a lot about what you do in your business and in your working time, and I think that that's a pretty fun story. I don't think that there are too many entrepreneurs that can truly isolate either their amount of passion for something, or the actual work itself. Like, for me, the things that I do in my free time, I'm still just immensely, like, there's a fire. Like, I was in a major flow state when I was making the pizza. Like, I didn't want anyone to talk to me. I was, like, running around the kitchen and doing all these types of things. And, like, I mean, that's how intense I get when I'm working on a problem that I care about. And I think that finding a way to do that in yourself, whether it's in leisure or work, is something very powerful.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about it is, even if it's like you said, even if it's tangential to the type of work you do on a day-to-day basis, or the kind of idea around your business, the mindset's the same. Like, I love watching professional athlete podcasts, right? Or like on YouTube. So I'll watch, JJ Redick podcasts, whatever. I just am very fascinated, even more broadly than basketball. Just, I love hearing experts talk about their craft. Because what is so, like, incredibly, it's just remarkable to me is the consistency you see across all of the different disciplines, right? They have this incredible drive or work ethic. They're obsessed with whatever they're doing. And ultimately what ends up happening is you see them take that same type of energy into kind of other disciplines. Just like you said, like Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians, fantastic comedian, phenomenal baker. Who would have thought?
Pretty funny. Well,
but it's that same mentality. It's the same mentality of kind of, there's an art to making a joke. There's an art to baking. There's kind of this value of serving, value of making people happy, providing something that brings joy. It's just a very interesting. I think you said it very well. I don't think entrepreneurs can kind of keep that in a bubble. Like, it kind of bleeds into other things as well. So that's a fantastic question to ask people.
Yeah. Well, another example, I saw an interview with Canelo Alvarez, the boxer, recently. Apparently he's, like, fascinated with real estate, and he has this huge real estate empire. He's opening like 90 gas stations called like Canelo Energy or something like that. And I assume it's in Mexico. But to me, it's like, look, like, I mean, and the late great Kobe Bryant, he was so passionate. He wanted, it was an Emmy, Grammy, I forget what the awards are, but
an Oscar,
that's what it was. Oh, it just happened. Jeez. He won an Oscar for a short film that he created. I mean, like, it was about basketball, but I mean, that if you're talking about like intense and intentional and passionate, I don't think that there's anyone who's like, I can't think of anyone, even the other great basketball players or athletes, that are intense and dedicated to pursuit of craft as he was. And that,
yeah, absolutely.
you know, like if he were to make me a pizza, I'd say like I bet it would be a great one. So.
Exactly. It's like, no, I'm gonna try that daggone pizza. All right, man. Thank you. Appreciate taking the time.